All right, now we're on to topic 5.7. So, the economic development and innovations. So, there's a lot to unpack here, but we're kind of going to be going over some really important factors that happen to show the changes and continuities because of industrialization, one of the big focus points of this particular unit. So the essential question is to what extent did businesses change from pre-industrialization to post-industrialization, and then identify and explain how consumerism changed culture in the period of 1750 to 1900. So our basic context is going to be industrialization, modernization is going to really be led by practices of new philosophies, really ones that stem from the Enlightenment period, like the ones of Adam Smith, who you see here in the picture. I'll talk about him more in detail in a few minutes. But those ideas of capitalism will replace the ideas of mercantilism and more pushing for laissez-faire policies by the government. So the government takes less of a hands-on approach in the economy, allows the free market to establish itself. So this is something we'll talk more in detail as we get going. So the language of the curriculum is Western and European countries began abandoning mercantilism and adopting free trade policies, partly in response to the growing acceptance of Adam Smith's theories of laissez-faire capitalism and free markets. And before we move on, I just want to do a quick review on mercantilism. And for those of you who don't remember mercantilism, like the goal of mercantilism was to minimize your imports and maximize your exports. That way you can collect more bullion or gold and silver to use towards building your military, whatever else the state needs to do. And the government's role in mercantilism was very protectionist. They wanted to help protect, especially joint stock companies like the British East India Trading Company. And so going back to your 8th grade history, I don't think any of you will remember this, but there was an act that was passed by the British Parliament called the Tea Act of 1773. And it was in a way to help bail out the failings of the East India Trading Company and basically made it so that the tea that the colonists consumed and had to buy was British East India Trading Company. This is a great example of protectionism. It was the government helping support a private company to keep them, doing well, even though they were failing. And so this is something that is going to, first of all, tick off the colonists and leads to them, having their own little tea party in Boston Harbor while destroying a bunch of British tea of the British East India Trading Company. But also it is something that is going to be rejected by the next wave of economic theories and principles that are going to be adopted and used, particularly Adam Smith's ideas of laissez-faire capitalism and the free market. So a little bit about Adam Smith. He was an economic philosopher, and he rejects mercantilism. Mercantilism has its good points. It helps the British gain a lot of wealth and capital. As a result, they are going to help. It helps them industrialize faster than any country in the world. But he also sees it as a major hindrance because when a company is supported by the government and not allowed to fail, then what they're doing is they're just protecting inefficient companies in the eyes of Adam Smith. And Adam Smith believes that it's important to allow the invisible hand, as he calls it, of the free markets to decide how the economy is going to be. And when he talks about the invisible hand, really he's referring to as the law of supply and demand. And so, prices of everything, are based off of supply and demand. People will act rationally, typically, for things that they want, things that they need, and everything that is available, there's a limitation, right? There's a limitation of resources. So it's up to businesses to provide those. So, the idea of this law of supply and demand, say, for example, gas. Gas is what? $2 something today, let's say $2.10. And that is a representation of, it's fairly low compared to previous years. And that's because demand is down. We're all, trying to, or a lot of people are working from home, people are going out less, people are traveling less. And so demand for gas is less so. But the supply of gas continues to stay steady. And so as a result, gas prices are low. Now, if coronavirus all of a sudden just disappeared and people's behaviors would change suddenly, then if the supply doesn't keep up with the demand, then the price of gas would then skyrocket. And that is essentially kind of the idea of supply and demand. The invisible hand, so the market will choose which companies are going to succeed, which companies are going to fail, depending on how well they adapt to what the market and what people want. And so this is the idea behind Adam Smith's, and it's a real basic idea to it. And when you get into economics classes, I'm sure it will be explained to you a heck of a lot better than I am. But regardless, he wants to promote laissez-faire economics, meaning the government needs to stay out of it. Let businesses and the free market decide how the economy should go. And so what ends up happening is you have a lot of new innovations, and there's more effects on how businesses are organized. You will see more corporations, more manufacturers will begin to form corporations, much more so. And that's because corporations have a minimized risk when you compare it to like one person investing all their money and assuming all of the risk. This allows the risk to be spread out on multiple people, the stockholders, and then as a result, like they only need to invest what they want, and then if that company fails, they only lose that initial investment. If that company succeeds, then that investment grows in its value, and to the point they want to either sell it off or try to invest more. So that is the whole reason why corporations come about, in allowing people to choose what companies they want to invest in, and which companies are doing well that make people want to invest in them. This is all part of that free market and laissez-faire idea. Now, there is a consequences that come with that, and because there's no government oversight, you do see some corporations become very powerful and form into monopolies. And monopolies is not just a game that nobody ever finishes, but it's more of the fact that is one company owning roughly 90+% of the market of anything. Some examples from history, you can talk about a lot. You can talk about some examples today. I mean, Facebook right now is being sued by the federal government to break up what they deem as a monopoly on social media. But the companies and the examples of this era, John D. Rockefeller in the United States, who was the oil tycoon, he pretty much controlled all oil through his company Standard Oil. And because he did that, he was making enormous amounts of money and had a humongous amounts of influence, because oil was something that was definitely needed all over the country in fuel and in lubricating all the machinery and equipment that is necessary to run factories. He is going to basically run the market on it and become very powerful individual as a result of that. Another example outside the United States is Alfred Krupp, who takes the Bessemer process and creates a steel monopoly within Germany. And Germany's industrialization, which was the fastest in Europe, was fueled primarily on the steel that he is providing. So he had an enormous amount of money and influence as a result too. But these monopolies, there's lots of other examples you can talk about. But there is a rejection of monopolies generally, because monopolies, we have one company providing the whole product. It's not the market that determines like what the price is, it's that company. And so if you had two companies that are competing for people to buy their products, then they're going to try to either make a higher quality product or lower the prices and let them people decide which they want to choose from. And this is more beneficial to the consumer. So I'm getting into a lot of economic stuff here, and I don't mean to, but I'm just trying to help clarify why monopolies would be more. There's the goods and bads of it, and one thing is that they are generally rejected later on as a result. Companies began to work across state boundaries, something I'll talk about in the next slides. Insurances were created to help kind of allow people to invest without little risk. If I invest into a ship, that ship sinks, the insurance covers the costs of that ship so that I don't lose money. And so less risk for me means that I'm more likely to invest. And so industrialization continues to happen and happen and happen. And of course, there's new banking policies that allow it and make it much easier to borrow. So moving on to our next big concept that is part of this topic point is the global nature of trade and production contributed to the proliferation of the large-scale transnational businesses that relied on new practices in banking and finance. Okay, so in other words, new companies are coming around. They are going across state boundaries, and so they may have headquarters in one country, but they have like factories in a whole bunch of others. So there's a lot of examples of these companies, and we're going to talk about one in particular that College Board provides, and it's Unilever. And I bet you, if you, for those of you who are at home right now, if you go into the shower and look at either the shampoo or like the body wash that you use, I bet you they will have like this symbol on there somewhere. And so this was a British and Dutch venture that focused on making household products, particularly soap. And so, like when I talk about transnational businesses, they don't really adhere to one country. They operate over the globe. And so Unilever it's got soap factories in Australia, the United States, Switzerland, and other places. But they also have, the raw materials they need are from other places, and they use palm oil as the basis of that. And so they got that from the Belgian Congo in Africa, which is now today the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we'll talk more about them later because like they create plantations, and in those plantations, some of the worst human rights violations in history occur in them. Essentially, you have slave laborers who are being forced to grow and extract palm oil and stuff. Because of the fact that they're over multiple borders, and because of their huge amount of scale of wealth and influence on multiple levels and multiple continents, it becomes very much true that transnational corporations become very powerful all over the world. And so there's some other examples here, like Dole, the bananas that were provided by United Fruit Company. They have a story with them that we'll talk about in the next unit as well. Today, that company is now known as Chiquita. De Beers is a jewelry company, and so they were based out of Brussels, I think. And then they had mines in South Africa that mined for diamonds and things like that. Shell oil company, and there's other oil companies, but these are all good examples of transnational corporations that do happen. And so this is a growing. It's not absolutely new because joint stock companies had existed, but they're growing more so in this era of history. The last thing we're going to talk about, the development of industrial capitalism led to the increased standard of living for some and to continued improvement in manufacturing methods that increase the availability, affordability, and variety of consumer goods. So essentially, it's going to change culture. And so we'll talk about the effects of mass culture on this. We become a culture of consumers. Consumerism is something that will definitely become more of a phenomenon within the working and middle class society. They have more money than they had in previous generations, and so now they want more stuff. And so buying and buying and buying and buying, even if you can't afford it in some cases, becomes a cultural phenomenon, and it still is around and exists today. I mean, you guys all just went through Christmas, and as a result, that is, some of you got gifts that you really wanted, and that's because you want it. It's not what you need, it's what you want. And that's really what consumerism is all about. And because of that, people need or want, I just say, leisurely activities such as biking. And you see these types of bikes here, which aren't around today for a reason. But biking itself comes around. Boating, which was originally used, sailors to go trade and to also fish and things like that. Now it's a leisurely activity. People just go out on the water. For those who can afford their own boats, go out and boat for a day. Sports become more popular. Football in Europe, which is really soccer here in the United States. Baseball becomes more popular in America. Rugby becomes more popular in England. And so each one of these sports, even like these countries like Europe, has influence all over the world. It's why soccer is such a very popular sport in the world today, the most popular sport in the world today, because Europeans touched much of the world in some form and brought with them that kind of culture. Same with baseball. Baseball, it's very popular in Japan, which America has a lot of ties to cultural exchanges with Japan. Same with Latin America, which we have a lot of cultural exchanges with Latin America. So baseball is very popular in the places that the Americas had done business with or part of, right? Rugby, same thing. Rugby is very popular in England, but it's also popular in Ireland and South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. These are all former parts of the British Empire. So, yeah, these sports become much more popular around the world. And then people at this time are demanding more cultural experiences. And so they want museums constructed. They want music halls constructed. They want public parks to be able to be available. And that becomes a new demand of local and state and national governments to provide these things for them. And so this is kind of in part, it's not everything, but in part, like how consumerism really changes culture around the world. Okay. So that's our essential questions. Make sure you get them done and submitted. This is Mr. Henry signing off.